first sessions were about security and capacity. This one is about direction. What kind of power system do the Nordics actually want? Finland brings, as we've heard, nuclear online. Norway modernizes hydro. Sweden and Denmark accelerate wind, solar. Demand grows faster than the grid. Can we still talk about the Nordic strategy? And if so, what should it be for? Security? Is it resilience? Industrial competitiveness? Lower prices? I am here now to invite 4 main speakers up here to talk about these things. We will hear from Vårgrønn, come up here, and from Fortum, Statkraft, and Energeia. So please welcome up on stage. Let's begin with one short round of opening perspectives, and I'm going to you, Simon, from Fortum, Finland. Finland has doubled down on nuclear as part of its energy mix. What was the key motivation behind that choice?
I mean, a long time ago, we built all the hydropower we had in the nation, and we built some coal, and after that we had started to investigate nuclear, and then we went all into nuclear, because that was the only way to electrify in the 50s, 60s, 70s after the war, when we really built new power production. And actually then in the 90s, power demand in the Nordics and in Finland became flat. And if we believe actually what we just heard here, that power demand will double again in the next 30 years, we have the same, let's say, adventure ahead that I think all the Nordic countries built.
Yeah.
Norway on hydro, Sweden chose also nuclear on top of hydro, Finland on nuclear. Now we need to build a lot of more power production quite quickly if we want to make this all happen.
But I mean, it took some time and it was very expensive, but you kind of managed to be there just in time for the Russian invasion.
I mean, Olkiluoto 3, yes. No. I mean, yes, we just on time. That was a project that we executed for long, and luckily we also got it online. And we trusted the Nordic neighbors to provide a security of supply before that, and that worked fairly well.
Paul Eitrheim, Statkraft is expanding hydropower, Rjukan, Norden, Alta, and at the same time investing heavily in wind. How do you see hydropower's role in balancing an increasingly variable system?
It's probably the biggest gem we have in our system, and several of the speakers today have touched upon the fact that it's incredibly flexible, and it plays perfectly together with the variable sources of supply. Our system is getting old, so a lot of the stations you talked about, Suldal, Ullaføre is one of the newer ones, and that is also aging. But we need to reinvest heavily both in maintenance, and in some places we can actually reinvest in new facilities, utilizing the same water in a better way. There is not a lot of new production coming out of this. There's a lot of new effect, so we can respond quickly to the changes in the market. So we believe that the onshore wind is probably the most competitive source of new power in the system that we can introduce in the system. But there are 2 caveats to that. I think Eivind used the word, he corrected you a bit. He said it wasn't cheap power, it was competitive power. I think that is a good point. And secondly, it will require enormous amounts of engagement with stakeholders to overcome quite a lot of the resistance that is out there. So we are looking for, I was at Moifjell last week. Our team there spent 120 meetings engaging with stakeholders to get them on board, and still now it's very much up to the municipality to decide.
But you also talk about almost a kind of a second generation of hydropower. What do you mean by that?
I mean by that the ones who are lucky enough to work on this now actually get to do the second time we're going to build these facilities. So the alternative we're facing is either we invest heavily in maintenance and bring the existing facilities up to speed to last for a longer period of time, or in some places we can actually build new tunnels and new waterways and introduce new machines. We will utilize the same water, but we will have much more effect coming out of it. And that is going to happen now over the next decade or so. Yeah.
And going over to Energeia, you represent the new generation of renewables, solar and storage. But Norway has been quite slow to adapt solar compared to its neighbors. What are we missing?
Well, it sort of comes out of where we're coming from with the hydro and the oversupply that we have in our system, and the fact that we could afford not to. But that's changing now, and when you look, I mean, yes, land-based wind is a power source that's welcome, but it's not really happening either. There is some enhancement of the hydropower stations, but solar is the only new generation that is currently being granted access to build and given concessions.
And we're going to go back to what kind of obstacles you meet in that process. I'm moving on to Vårgrønn. Stephen, you operate across Europe, from Germany to the UK and to Baltics. Do you see any sign of coordinated Nordic approach to offshore wind?
It would be good if there was a coordinated approach. I think that probably goes for pretty much everything in the energy system. We've heard all about that all today. It's up to every country itself, obviously, to decide its own development. Obviously, Denmark is miles ahead when it comes to offshore wind. They've got 2,700 megawatts in there. Norway's got just under 100. Finland, under 50. Sweden, just under 200. And the ironic thing is that Norway kicked off with floating offshore wind in 2009. There's been references to hydro all the time, but there's another reference to hydro who kicked off with that one with high wind concept. So, every country itself also has energy identity. So there's something also about comparative advantage. The last presentation was really good because it did show where the sweet spots are in certain parts of the Nordic region. So we've got obviously nuclear for Finland and Sweden. Why doesn't let Norway just do more of that and maybe pay more money to Vattenfall to make it happen, or to other companies? But Norway's energy identity is with an offshore, the oil and gas, obviously, but also offshore wind as well. And as Paul mentioned, it's not easy to build an onshore wind farm in this country. Nothing's happened, we haven't built hardly any more megawatts since 2021. So it's a more expensive technology, but it also fits also with Norway's identity, but also its energy transition from oil and gas to bring more into offshore wind.
But when we talk about the Nordics here today, do you feel that there is a Nordic kind of system in this, or do you feel more related to the rest of the world? Is there something called Nordic cooperation within this power system?
If I take it on different levels, there should be. I mean, you've got the TSOs already in full agreement, and fantastic to see that. But I think there's more of a political drive that probably needs to be pushing, but also you can't forget Europe in this. This is extremely important. This is a European issue. This is an energy security issue, and really thank you to Statkraft for putting that on the agenda, because it's not enough on the agenda politically. But it needs a holistic view of this. And the tough thing also is obviously Norway's non-membership of the EU, but obviously other parts of the EU, without bringing up a big debate about that. This is something that really needs to be looked at further. And the whole debate around interconnectors hopefully is a bit parked a little bit, and then we can move on from there and think more about security as well.
Do you think, I mean the discussions around interconnectors, do you think it's parked, or is it wishful thinking?
Oh, you just have one in government at the moment, so they don't have a coalition partner. But it's a super difficult discussion. But you could think of it in terms of not just energy security, but again the integration of that. One of the from Fridtjof Nansen Institute, when they talked about Denmark potentially reviewing whether to be part of the euro or even Sweden because of better integration and security. So we should at least better talk about cables here in Norway.
Simon.
I mean, I'm a true Nordist, or believe in Nordic Nytta, and sometimes it's gone ups and downs. Today, actually, I'm more optimistic again after hearing all the presentations today. I actually remember I was looking at the grid plan 2015, and that time the only plans that was in the Nordic grid plan was interconnectors to the continent, and there was nothing between the Nordic countries. Yeah. And actually seeing now that we talk about a much stronger Nordic coherent grid, I think we have gone light years ahead on the grid planning, and that's super exciting, and that's I'm happy about. Then the area that maybe I would want to see more still coherence is on the, let's say, the system operation and the market itself. Yeah. Because eventually, all of us who are doing power production, we need to survive on competitive markets. And the markets are getting more complex and more scattered and more illiquid. And there's a lot of issues where the underlying markets are working more inefficiently. And that is then causing also uncertainty for investments that you should do that obviously should be there in the next period. So I would want to see much more cooperation on the market side. Yeah. And then I don't know if it's politically realistic or not, because every nation has different political agendas. And is it possible to get politicians to a room and agree that we are working truly for Nordisk Nytta or not?
Nordisk Nytta, write it down. Paul, is there any chance that we can come into kind of a 2.0 version of the Nordic energy market that actually was almost the map for the European one? Do you think so?
I was encouraged by what I heard today, and I knew that the TSOs are actually probably the branch of government that is collaborating much more than what is visible from the outside. So I was also encouraged by what I heard. And my perspective is that let's think about a system where every country is just thinking about themselves and they're only optimizing on their own behalf.
Yeah.
That's going to be a much more costly system. It's going to be less secure. And it's going to have a hell of a lot of nature loss than what we currently have, because you can look at this through an integrated system. And I think that I'm not a politician, but if I was a politician, I would certainly encourage it, because it is a much more efficient way of thinking than just optimizing through the national lens.
But there are some obstacles. I mean, Norway outside of the EU. We have now finally Sweden and Finland in NATO, but there are some certain differences there. And the national interests are also growing stronger. So how do you see yourself as Statkraft within a Nordic system?
We have to do what we do best, and that is to develop hydropower and onshore wind with as little cost as possible, and bring those electrons to market as efficiently as we can. But we're also part of a system. So some of the complexities that we talked about here. Let's say that we bring a lot of new hydropower or a new power project into the market. There is a massive development of grid, and everything is happening at the same time. That is also going to come with quite a significant cost. And what we're going to do is that we're going to create our own inflation. So there are some trade-offs in how that system is going to work. So we need to make sure that we do our part, which is the industrial part. And then we need politicians and regulators who are enabling the rest of us to do what we do best.
We heard now, I mean, Martine said that also in Norway we will discuss, and we are discussing nuclear power. Is that a good idea, Simon?
Yes, nuclear is a great idea.
But for Norway?
Why not? I know that politically here it's not the most popular one, but I mean, nuclear is one of the generation forms. Yeah. I think in the end of the day, a customer is not buying nuclear power, hydropower, solar, etc. They just buy electrons. Very seldom a customer comes to me and says, Simon, I want to buy a specific technology. They want to buy affordable, competitive, good electricity. And then it's up to us that we have a system which is in balance and is providing that on a competitive terms. And we need all.
What we hear now is the reason why I want kind of a Kalmar Union president from Finland, because they are so pragmatic in everything. But I was also thinking about, is it here that you could say that the Swedes and Finland, they provide with nuclear power. In Norway, we have more of this. In Sweden and in Denmark, there are more solar and wind. I mean, to kind of share it within this big frame of a Nordic cooperation.
But we are already doing it. I mean, Finland has built a lot of wind. Yeah. And all the time when it's windy, we are exporting a lot to Baltics and to Sweden and to Norway. And then when it's non-windy, we are actually importing a lot of hydropower from Sweden and Norway, and even like burning stone from Estonia to balance our system. So that's how it works in reality.
Stephen?
It's quite easy to write about in the newspapers that Norway can build nuclear overnight. In reality, it's not really that way. I'm British. I mean, I remember at Hinkley Point, which is one of the largest nuclear developments in Europe at the moment, Tony Blair approved that. Do you remember him? So he proved that.
He's back.
He's back. He's going to save us again.
He's going to rebuild Gaza.
So it goes back then, and there's a lot of cost increases, but there's SMR, small modular reactor technology, only been fully developed in China and Russia, still to be developed. We hope it does, and it should be. There's space for nuclear, but it won't save us overnight. This is you need a long-term view of this. You need a very long-term political acceptance between parties that nuclear is something where you want to work. This is a decades-ahead project, especially if we do it in Norway. Similar with offshore wind as well, and it's just to move from this short-term thinking to actually a long-term positive energy policy is what you need.
Do you want to comment upon that as the kind of Statkraft before I'm moving on to solar panels here?
I want to see what's happening in that space, and I've no doubt that Sweden and Finland has a head start on Norway. And if you're asking about Statkraft, it's not for us. It grossly underestimates the time it takes to actually develop the capabilities. And we don't have regulations. It's a tall task for anyone starting from scratch.
I just want to bring you into the conversation here, because as you already, you told me before that you have kind of the big giants, and then solar is coming into this mix. And what is it actually that solar can provide within this sphere and this mix that we have talked about now?
Well, first of all, we can demonstrate that solar has a place in the energy system, also in Norway. Seeing is believing. And just like it's being mentioned now, land-based wind, nuclear, it's difficult in Norway, and it's proven difficult. So you need to open up to other sources of generation, and solar is an obvious one. And it would be strange, though, if you look to the rest of the continent and the rest of the world, that Norway shouldn't take part in that technology and develop it as far as we can. Of course, it'll always be a supplement in the Norwegian energy mix and the Nordic energy mix, but it has a part there. It has a part to play.
One of your points is that there are no incentives to have downtime on the grid. What do you think? Why do you say that?
Well, I guess that's with the community here, though, but traditionally, TSOs and DSOs are penalized for having downtime in the grid, rather than being incentivized to be a little bit ahead, be ahead with the grid, and measure how much new power have you connected in the last quarter. And that's like was mentioned by Bulk in the previous session. We should emphasize that we're a little bit ahead than a little bit behind. Even though, having said that, the system that we currently have worked well for many years, but it doesn't work with the situation in society today.
Why?
Well, obviously, because now the demand for more power is so imminent. It comes from every industry. Everyone knows that now, but you can't build grid overnight.
No, Simon, you had your hand raised. I'm not sure if that was what you wanted to talk about. You had a point about nukes.
No, I'm somehow like so naively like Nordic that I think like it's like how we use the resources. So if Sweden and Finland built more nuclear, as the nations actually want to do, that's potentially also serving Norway, as Norwegian hydro is serving also balancing the other countries. So that's also that if we would really be ambitious on Nordisk Nytta, we should also look at generation advocacy, power system as a whole, and not one nation at a time. And actually a big part of the Nordic customers, the big energy-intensive industry, is also Nordic. So many companies which are big in Norway, they are big in Sweden and Finland, and the opposite. So there's a lot to win if one would be more ambitious. But then the question is that politically realistic in the world where there is Norges pris and there is like Swedish prices on the floors and this and that also?
That was the big elephant in the room, perhaps. Norges pris, we did not discuss that so far, but you can now dwell upon that a little bit. But what I'm hearing from you almost is that we need a new strategic conversation on also if the Nordic cooperation is strong. Is it resilience? Is it due to security? Is it price? Is it something else? Is it industry? What do you think, if you were to write this strategy?
No, I'm very much in favor of a Kalmar Union, and I'm a Finn who actually lives in Sweden, and I love Sweden and Norway also. So I think there should be a much stronger vision. I think we should work on security and resilience, we should work on grid planning, and we should also work on market development much more together.
So,
but I think we need to exactly what you said. We need to recognize that there are some differences. There are some, the way that power supply is built up in the countries, they're actually complementary. So I think there's something around how do you develop a strategy for the long term, while at the same time recognizing the peculiarities of each of these markets. I think there's quite a bit of upside in that, and that is maybe the political dialogue and the overlay that is missing in the discussion, because I have no doubt that the TSOs will actually work hand in glove on this, and it seems like they're already doing it, but I think it's that political overlay that is missing.
Yeah. Offshore wind depends on transmission networks that don't yet exist. Who should take the lead? Is it the governments or the private sector in building the infrastructure of the transitions?
Good question. It varies in different regimes. So, for example, if you build an offshore wind project in the UK, you have to build the offshore transmission, but you have to sell it because you're not allowed to own it as well as produce at the same time. So you get that money back from there and then a small yield on top. So that's a model. The Utsede Nord, you don't need to build the grid out there. Basically, you build an offshore wind farm when it happens. So it varies, where France does the same thing. France, the network in France will build the grid for you, so you just build a wind farm out there. So it varies in these different regimes. And that also comes down to what sort of support regime you're looking for as well, whether you give it upfront investment support to it, like you're expected to do in Norway, and you've done it for carbon capture and storage as well, or you do a contract for difference, where you can actually guarantee the price over a period of time. So there's pros and cons around that.
Simon?
And I think actually the larger question is that if we're going to double the power production, and we believe that we will have huge consumption, we also need to build a lot of greenfield assets, new power production. And actually operating brownfield old assets is a different ballgame than building new things, because you have cost of capital, you need forecastability, you need long-term commitments. So I think this is the political discussion. What is the tool? Is it CFDs? Is it like state-backed guarantees? Is it through grid connections? What's the way how the society helps to stabilize the investments if we want them to come? And that's something that we should talk much more when we talk also about market development. Also nuclear will need it, like all big technology, even probably big hydropower stations. Pumped storage will also need something.
I think on the, we talked about these upgrades of hydropower projects that we are looking at, and there's a pretty significant portfolio with quite a lot of effect, but they all depend, or more or less all of them depend on grid. So I think it's crucial that we don't end up in this chicken and egg conversation. There is a symbiotic relationship between the two, and I think there would be merit in even closer coordination between the grid operator and the producers, and making sure that we are early enough engaging and comparing notes, and that we can actually have the same plans, because I think there's quite a lot of delay potential if we fail to compare notes on how we want to see this developed.
And I mean, let's turn to trust, because energy form has its critics. To Fortum, how do you manage to build public trust for nuclear in Finland?
Finland is a very pragmatic country.
Yeah, that's what I already said. I just thought I don't need to ask this question.
And I was actually in charge of a nuclear event, and discussed a lot with the Green Party, even that time when the Green Party also started to support nuclear. So we had in the past, there were political parties who were against, but then there were some very pragmatic politicians also in the Green Party who went in favor. So I think we have all the political parties are in favor of nuclear, and we have 70 to 80% general public think nuclear is great. And then of course it's up to us also as industry that we need to prove that we operate nuclear safely, we have a high availability, we are doing it very competitively. So we also need to prove that every day as we are doing. So there is a high trust in Finland that nuclear is good, and it's a part of the energy mix, and there's no questions about it currently.
And when Russians try to tell something else, you just close your ears, as in, for instance,
no, actually
Germany.
the war in Russia even increased the popularity about nuclear.
Yeah, I guess. Paul?
There are issues with all energy forms in different shapes and forms, and I think there's something around how do we minimize the impact that we're imposing on the communities where we go in. We've been through the historic development of hydropower in Norway with all the battles of the past that we have been through. I think the next generation of hydropower will have a different and a smaller type of footprint, but we are in the middle of it in terms of onshore wind. And I think there is, I think we as an industry would benefit from a little bit more humility in terms of how we approach this, and how difficult a lot of local communities actually find those developments to be. And then you need to spend time to make sure that you earn the trust that you need to be able to develop new projects.
I just wanted to support you on that. We've had some of these town hall meetings where we decided to put forward all the negative things about solar, presenting them one after the other, and that changed the mood of the people there. So instead of attacking us for not telling the truth, even Naturvernforbundet opened up their speech with saying, well, since you did that way, I'm going to change my speech now. It's all about trust.
Is there an underlying criticism here that has not been done in the right way so far? That the discussions we feel, the ignition it is in society whenever we talk about, because this has turned into one of the main topics in the culture war almost, to talk about power.
I think it's an example of how humans are able to learn. And you learn slow through incremental improvement in a steady state, and then you learn fast if you do something that doesn't work that well. And I think in some cases of the energy industry, we are where we have to learn, otherwise the option won't be there.
Stephen?
It's obviously, energy policy in itself is incredibly complicated, so it's not like a good, easy soundbite to have when you talk to people in stakeholder relations, but it's bringing it down to the local issues, as always. That's usually the best way of doing it, and building on the best examples. So what Norway has done, at least when it comes to the the coexistence between oil and gas, the fishing industry, offshore industry, is pretty decent. It's one of the best in the world, no doubt about it. And then we've basically copied this as much as we can. So we use Offshore Nordica, one of the industry groups there, who has developed a playbook agreed by all the main fishing associations and the offshore wind industry to actually come with resolutions how to deal with problems together. So that's a great advantage and a really good example of using the best of what we've got from something before.
I've had almost a kind of an existential crisis due to the fact that the Finns and the Swedes are much longer. I mean, they have done the wind power offshore for a much longer time, bigger projects than Norway with our coastline. That's a little bit embarrassing, isn't it?
Embarrassing. We're moving on. We've got Sørlige Nordsjø 2, we've got Utsira Nord. We hope there will be further projects in the future. But the thing is that Norway's kind of naively didn't think that we needed new power. And then suddenly, oh no, we need new power because it's 150 euros a megawatt or industries closing down to do that or jobs. So I think this, again, the problem is that you have a very short-term discussion around energy policy, particularly in Norway. And it's, this human right that we should have free electricity almost. That the bathroom always needs to be 35 degrees. That, we need to think further ahead.
I hate freezing. I must admit. Simon, just shortly, because I have one question for all of you for the last minute.
Actually, you stole quite a lot. I have been building actually power stations in all Nordic countries. And the resistance is the largest in Norway, then in Sweden, and Finland is the most pragmatic one. I don't know if that's history or nation or what's explaining it, but that's how usually it is. And then you always need to work with local communities to get people convinced and tell what you are doing.
Since this is the last panel, I just want to ask you all, one line. What gives you hope and motivation? I will start with you, Egil.
What gives me hope and motivation? Well, if I put it in this context, is that I think, and I'm pretty sure that Statnett and the DSO will find space in their grids to connect more solar power, and they will find space to do this on agreements with conditions.
Paul?
I had a boss once who said, at the end of the day, gravity will prevail, and that's where my hope is.
He's from Odda.
That's true.
Simon?
I'm just thinking pragmatically that I think the Nordics has the best conditions to build more power production, and there is a lot of need both from data centers, from new industry, etc. So if we just play this all right, there is a huge opportunity for continued welfare in this region and more welfare. So I think we have to do it.
Liberal, democratic, open societies, NATO membership, our role in Europe, all of that is super important to make it work.
And we have to make it work, don't we? Thank you, all of you, for this, to sharing with us.